It's good to be fortunate.
Yeah, definitely more a matter of luck, at least for us.
Probably maybe too many people are using Zoom and getting a problem, everybody.
Yeah, hey, there was a thing online in England this morning where the outage started. And what they said was the church broke Zoom. All the churches that were doing Zoom services in England and maybe elsewhere in Europe. So the church broke Zoom. Don't blame it on the Jews.
Yeah, well, my Wi-Fi is back up, so I'm glad to hear
Oh,
that.
mazel tov. Well, you're good all around, Lou.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that.
Yeah. So let me experiment here and see if I can pull up our texts. How's that?
Hey.
Perfect.
Are we on 14?
Yeah, that's where we finished 13 last week.
Okay.
So here we are. So let's begin. All right. So we started in on sets of fours last time. And this teaching tells us there are 4 kinds of students. There are those who are quick to understand, but quick to forget. Their gain is canceled by their loss. There are those who understand with difficulty, but forget with difficulty. In other words, once they learn it, they retain it. Their loss is canceled by their gain. Those who are quick to understand and forget with difficulty, they are wise. Those who understand with difficulty and are quick to forget, they have a bad portion. Things, it's just really harder to learn if you're not blessed with, something at one of those 2 ends. So the first type of student, quick to learn and quick to forget, made me think of students who cram for finals. Okay? That's not real education. If the grade is all you care about, then that's superficial learning. If you are the second kind, slow to understand, but you retain it, then you just have to be more methodical and put some more concentration into it, and you will manage. Then there are some people who are gifted, but it doesn't say really that they are great, because gifts are about what you do with them. Gifts are a blessing, but they are not an achievement. And some people just don't have the capacity for so much learning. It's bad luck. It's a bad portion, a bad fortune, but it doesn't make them bad people. And in that connection, I'm reminded of something that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once said. He said, "When I was young, I admired clever people, and now that I'm old, I admire kind people." So that's something for us to keep in mind as we evaluate who we are and who are the people who are around us. On the person who is quick to learn but quick to forget, Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum notes that a person needs time to put one's skills into practice. You need time to listen, to recognize, to internalize, to think, and to produce a response. Because, rapid transmission doesn't give one time to process everything that's been transmitted and to think through new ideas. And sometimes they just get forgotten as if they had never been transmitted. Yet another reason why Jewish learning needs to continue into adulthood. We didn't really need this Mishnah to tell us that there are different kinds of learners. And Rabbi Mark Angel suggests that the purpose of this Mishnah is not to give us this information, but to remind us to be patient, both with ourselves and with others. Because people learn and retain information in different ways. So we should try to understand each person's strengths and weaknesses. The best teachers use many different techniques so as to connect with all learners. You know, after all, some people appear to have significant learning problems, but they can learn anything they need to know if you know how to reach them, if you know how to convey the information in a way that they can absorb it. Comments or questions up to here?
A question not related to this particular Mishnah. I have a book, a series of books on Pirkei Avot from it's an Art Scroll Masorah series.
Yes.
And this particular Mishnah describing learning is number 15 and not 14. And are you aware of a difference of numbering?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There are some who divide one of the earlier teachings in this chapter, I forget which one, but who divide it into two separate ones.
Okay, that's enough.
Yeah. I follow the division in the version of Pirkei Avot that appears in the conservative prayer books, both in Lev Shalem and in Sim Shalom. So that's why you have what I have.
Okay, well, I'm working out of Lev Shalem anyway, but I happen to have this other series, and I was leafing through it, and I go, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But that's the only reason for the, the difference. Other comments or questions? All right, then. Number 15. Let me just see if I can put this down. There we go. Okay, so there are 4 types of people who give to tzedakah. There are those who want to give, but they do not want others to give. They begrudge their fellow human beings the mitzvah. Those who want others to give, but refuse themselves to give, they are miserly. There are those who want to give and also want others to give. They are saintly. There are those who do not want others to give and themselves do not give, and they are wicked. Right? So 4 kinds of people who give tzedakah. What's the primary assumption behind this teaching? What's the assumption in this teaching?
It's not natural, innate to give.
Well,
selfish.
That's one thing. You do have to be taught to give. You have to be encouraged to give. But there's another assumption here. There are
those who need the gift.
Well, there's that too. Right? The other assumption is that giving tzedakah is, in fact, a mitzvah. Okay? It's something that every one of us should do. Right? Now, if you give tzedakah, but you really don't want others to do it, why would you wish for that? It's because you want the credit for yourself. You don't want others to get the credit or the attention that you will get. So you're not doing it as a mitzvah. You're doing it for your own glory. But that's not really tzedakah. That's not really fulfillment of the mitzvah. And I'm not really sure whether that is much better than wanting others to give but not giving yourself. Because it's not really a fulfillment of the mitzvah if you're not wanting others to do so. And Rabbi Reuven Bolka points out that the individual who is blessed with a good portion and who is able to give substantially is likely to be envied by someone who's not been blessed with the same resources. And that envy can lead a person to do good things, right? It can get you to work hard and you seek to pull yourself up and earn a good living and so forth. But if that envy affects how you feel about someone else's ability to give tzedakah, that can only have a bad ending. And that's the person who would like to give but wants others not to give. It only begrudges other people the opportunity to do something good. So giving tzedakah is not supposed to be a competition or a zero-sum game. It's supposed to be a mitzvah for every one of us. Then you have the second kind of person who only wants other people to give, but not give himself. This person is saying, I don't have to care about anybody else. I don't have any responsibility for the rest of the world. So if there are problems that have to be addressed, someone else wants to address them, that's fine. But let the rest of the world deal with them. It's not my problem. You know, to be so separated from what other people need means that that person is inevitably divorced from everyone else around them and also from God, because they're not concerned about the mitzvah either. Contrast this person with the one who gives and wants others to give, you know, who sees everyone else as connected to them and not only obligated to participate, but eligible to participate. The Maharal of Prague gives a different interpretation of the second kind of person, the one who only wants others to give. And he says, this person is great at soliciting other people, as long as no one else finds out that he isn't personally giving, right? He'll spend all the time in the world asking other people to give. He's a great solicitor. He's not such a great giver, right? And he's not as bad as the wicked person who not only doesn't give, but doesn't want others to give. But he'll raise money, but he won't contribute for himself. One of the things that I learned when I was in rabbinical school and I was interning with a particular rabbi was that if you're raising money for something, you got to ask yourself first. You got to be the first to give. And so I made that a practice over the years. If I was going to solicit people for something, I made sure that I was committed to it first. And then, I felt that I was acting with a little bit more integrity. And hopefully other people felt that I was acting with integrity when I asked them. Right? What if someone takes out of proportion to what they give? Such a person is guilty of eating what Kabbalah calls the bread of shame. Right? People may think that they come out ahead if they take something without having given anything in return. Those people are actually just humiliating themselves because, they consume the bread of shame. They don't realize that taking without giving anything back, the best of their ability, really debases them. To fail to give charity appropriate to one's means is the sign of a very callous person. On the subject of tzedakah, Rabbi Mark Angel quotes Chekhov in one of his story called Gooseberries. And this is what Chekhov says. Says, there ought to be behind the door of every happy, contented man, someone standing with a hammer continually, reminding him with a tap that there are unhappy people, that however happy he may be, life will show him her laws sooner or later. Trouble will come for him, disease, poverty, losses, and no one will see or hear, just as now he neither sees nor hears others. But there is no man with a hammer. Right? So I thought that was an interesting social commentary. Rabbi Tamar Lad Applebaum points out something very interesting in the order of these teachings. We saw one about 4 kinds of students, and now there's one about 4 kinds of givers. And the next one we're going to look at is about 4 kinds of scholars. So why does the one about givers, about tzedakah, interrupt these 2 about students? Those 2, it seems they should go together. And the answer she gives is that students don't go straight to being scholars, right? Students have to live in the real world of give and take before they can really become leaders. And only after they know that there are those who are needy and deal with them in a menschlich way, only then can they become true scholars. So these are, a few thoughts from the tradition about this teaching. Comments or questions up to here?
Rabbi, not related to the class, but I'm going to turn off and reboot my computer because I can hear half of what you're saying.
Okay, Roberto, you do what you need to do. Okay? We're going to carry on. You do what you need to do, okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, apparently Zoom is not the only thing that's having problems today. All right. Next, number 16. Back to learners. 4 other divisions between Jews who learn. It says there are 4 types. Among those who attend the Beit Midrash, there are those who attend but do not practice mitzvot. Right? Well, so they receive a reward for their attendance at the house of study. Right? They're not so good at a lot of the other stuff, but they learn. So that's good. They get credit for that. Those who practice mitzvot but do not attend the house of study regularly, all right, so they don't learn so much, but they receive a reward for doing other things. Right? They get credit for what they do, and that's good. Those who both attend and practice mitzvot, they are saintly. Those who neither attend nor practice mitzvot, they are wicked. Right? So the basic point of this, which we've seen before, is that there should be a connection between study and practice. Right? It's not just an intellectual process. The intellectual process has to lead to certain actions. And Maimonides explains the issue as follows. He says, the person who has mastered both wisdom and practice will know that there is a middle path in life that should be our goal. The one who goes beyond the middle way to the good is a chassid, a pious, a saintly person. Right? The one who goes the other way towards evil, right? That person is a rasha, a wicked person, a sinner. Some people learn, but they don't practice, and some people practice, or at least try to, but without learning, how do you necessarily know exactly what to do? So let's say that you go to some venue of Jewish learning, which teaches you more about how to live Jewishly, but then you decide, I don't really want to do that. I'm Jewish enough. I do enough. Right? So having gone to learn a little bit, even if you don't follow up on it, it might have a certain ambiance which would uplift and inspire a person. But that doesn't always translate into real life. Right? The flip side is the person who practices but doesn't go to learn. But if you don't learn, then you don't understand as much, and so you probably won't be inspired to do a whole lot more. One of the other reasons that study is so important in Judaism is that Judaism doesn't demand people to obey blindly. Right? Following the law is important, but you have to know the reasons. And if you know the reasons, then you know the exceptions, and you know the direction that the law should take us. Right? And we believe that God wants us to use all of our rational faculties to try to determine the truth. Jewish tradition promotes a thinking religiosity. We're not supposed to be robots who just automatically keep Jewish rules. And so then we know how to deal with exceptional situations. We know how to deal with things in unusual circumstances. And I really believe that that's a good expression for some of the things we have to do today in the time of the pandemic, right? When we're not able to do a lot of the things that we normally do, but if we've learned, if we understand enough, then maybe we know how to make choices and deal with this different time. What about a person who goes to learn, but he doesn't perform the mitzvot that he learned? You might be tempted to call this person a hypocrite, right? But in reality, this person is just like most of us in that he's inconsistent. We're all at least a little bit inconsistent, and no good action is worthless, right? So, says the Mishnah, this person will be rewarded for having studied, even though ideally we would want him to follow through, right? And maybe one day he will. And that's certainly true of the one who performs good deeds, but who does not learn. Because if you keep the right company and you do the right things, that certainly is going to work to your credit. Comments or questions up to here?
Rabbi, the last one, those, go back up, please.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Oops.
Those who neither attend nor practice mitzvot, they are wicked. How in the world can they be scholars?
Well, intellectually, they can be, certainly learned. You're generally not considered a scholar if you don't do. And yet, there are cases in our tradition of people who were extremely learned, even though they were not models of action. The extreme case of this in our tradition is the story of Elisha ben Abuya, who we talked about in one of the earlier chapters in Pirkei Avot. Elisha ben Abuya was one of the rabbis in the Beit Midrash in the early 2nd century, in the time of Rabbi Akiva. But Elisha ben Abuya became a heretic at a certain point, and became an apostate. And yet, Rabbi Meir, one of the other people in the Beit Midrash, would sometimes go to Elisha ben Abuya and say, do you remember the discussion we had about, this, a certain issue? And what was the result of that discussion? And Elisha ben Abuya would tell him what he remembered. And Rabbi Meir would say, thank you. And then, the next time he had a question or something that he'd forgotten, he'd come back to Elisha ben Abuya, even though Elisha ben Abuya was, no longer observant, no longer even considered himself part of the Jewish community. So, that's an extreme case, but, it's, one strand of the tradition.
Is this another way of saying once you study, you continue studying, you reach the attainment of scholar, but then you keep on studying and keep on studying because study never ceases?
Well, and that, that's for sure, independent of how much you practice and, what your model of practice is. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's always more to learn. It's, I have learned, I've studied a number of different commentaries on Pirkei Avot. I'm also confident that there'll be others. That, whatever I have to share from what I've learned is not the be all and end all. It's not the final word on Pirkei Avot. It's just, a little bit of what might make it more meaningful for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions? All right. Let's go to number 17. So we should understand 4 different types of students. Right? It says there are 4 types among those who study Torah with the sages. There is the sponge, the funnel, the strainer, and the sifter. The sponge absorbs everything. Right? The funnel, in one end and out the other. The strainer passes the wine and retains the dregs. The sifter removes the chaff and retains the groats. In other words, retains what's edible. Right? So uncritical students might be gullible. As, they listen to experts, but hey, if you just take in everything, how do you really know who's an expert and who's not? Right? If you don't know that, then you take everything you hear as true. That may not work out so well. Inattentive students, like the funnel, they lose the lesson as soon as they receive it. Right? And some students are problematic because they don't know what points are the most important to remember. They just get scattered fragments of information. Right? But the ideal student is the one who is critical, who is attentive, and who retains what's most important. The Maharal points out something that's very important about learning Torah. In the prayers, in your weekday prayer book and the Shabbat prayer book as well, in the prayers before the beginning of the service, right, there is a bracha for Torah study. It says, V'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has commanded us to be occupied with the words of Torah. Doesn't say to learn the words of Torah. To learn means to learn from someone else or with someone else, right? But to be occupied means that there are times when you have to study on your own. And if you don't come to a class, you can still learn on your own. There are thousands and thousands of books in English that will help you progress and become more confident in your knowledge of Judaism. And anyone, no matter how busy you are, anyone can do that for 10 minutes a day. Okay? Everyone can commit 10 minutes a day to learning more about their Judaism. Right? Rabbi Shmuley Yankovitz points out something interesting in relation to this teaching, which is kind of the flip side of what I just said before. You know, attendance is very important. You know, here we are, we go to classes through live streaming and Zoom sessions and podcasts and so forth. And it's certainly true that technology can make Torah and Jewish life and Jewish learning much more accessible. But virtual learning is still, I think, lacks a little bit of what we need. It's not the same as learning in the room together. It's not the same as learning face-to-face. And learning face-to-face, you know, being in the room together at the synagogue also promotes community. It encourages people to ask each other questions, to debate things. It also encourages spiritual connection. So right now, we're doing the best we can without having the benefit of those things. But you know, we want to go back to that. We want to have that kind of learning available to us at all times. So, 4 qualities among students. Right? If you've been a teacher, you've seen all of these types. Right? Some students are like a sponge. Right? And, you know, we sometimes think that's terrific, right? Oh, he's such a sponge, right? But a sponge, which takes in everything, doesn't necessarily distinguish between what is worthwhile and what's not, right? Or to distinguish between what you need to save for some other day and what you need to apply for today. Okay? You know, sponges are so absorbent. And you know, sponges also tend to get a little grungy, right? If they don't discriminate between what they absorb, they can be vulnerable to authoritarian figures and their cults, and you know, to you know, just not knowing exactly where they should follow. Some students are like a funnel, right? And that's what we say about some of our kids, that what we tell them goes in one ear and out the other. Sometimes knowledge is digested, but not for very long. Right? And it doesn't get integrated into people's selves. And similarly, there are a lot of lessons that we learned back in Cheder that we didn't see how relevant they were, and so we didn't hold on to them. And we didn't, many people, learned certain things for their bar or bat mitzvah, and they didn't see why they should hold on to that. So they didn't. Right? Some students are like the strainer. The strainer lets out the wine and keeps the sediment. Huh. That doesn't sound very good, does it? Keeping the junk and losing that which is really valuable and useful. Right? So this means that whatever the student keeps is going to be of less quality than what he received. And unfortunately, some people will garble the meaning of whatever they've been taught, and they will get the wrong implication from what they were told. So it takes a special kind of teacher to retrain a student who distorts what they have heard. The Maharal of Prague talks about a student who is a strainer. He says, this is someone whose thinking skills are flawed. And he hears an argument and he thinks, well, that makes sense, that's reasonable. But in reality, it's a very weak argument, which a better student would easily refute. Right? So opinions appeal to him, even though they're not things that he's thought through very carefully or soundly. And this is why we as adults should re-examine many of the decisions that we made when we were young. Because after all, we made them when we weren't great thinkers, right? If I had stuck to all the decisions that I made when I was 14 years old, right? How great would my decisions be? Well, I know that when I was 14, I wasn't that smart. Or maybe I was intellectually smart, but emotionally, I was kind of clueless. So I ought to go back and revisit some of those decisions. And so should we all. Right? And then finally, you have the opposite of the strainer. You have the sifter, the student who is like a sieve, right? Which is the process here of preparing high quality flour. The sifter removes the bran and retains the fine flour, right? So unlike the strainer, this student thinks clearly, understands what's being taught, draws the proper implications from what's being taught. And they understand what's important, what matters most, and very importantly, they also know when they need to draw on such teaching. Okay. Comments or questions up to here?
Sponge is like the internet. If it's on the internet, it must be true.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you learn from experience with that too, don't you?
Sure do.
Yeah. So the sooner we learn that, the better off we are. Anyone else? Okay. Next, number 18. Right? And this teaching is an answer to a very important life question. And the question is, how do you know when love is real? Right? So here's the teaching. It says, when love depends on achieving a certain goal, love vanishes when that goal is achieved. But a love that is not dependent on any goal never vanishes. What is an example of love which is conditional? The love of Amnon for Tamar. So I assume you all are familiar with the story of Amnon and Tamar. Tamar and Amnon are half siblings from different wives of King David, and Amnon becomes obsessed with Tamar, ultimately assaults her sexually, and then he's done with her. Right? What is an example of unconditional love? The love of David and Jonathan. Right? So the answer to the question, how do you know when love is real? Here, it's when it's truly love of the person, and it's not about something that you want from the other person. Right? Amnon was obsessed with Tamar, but as soon as he had his way with her, and the interest was gone. Right? Saul's son Jonathan would have been king after his father, if not for King David. And yet, Jonathan loved him anyway. That was a friendship that was genuine, and it was unselfish. And this teaching tells us that true love is a relationship which is not based on the needs fulfilled by a partner or by what thing your partner has. Because the thrill of getting what you want evaporates once that need is satisfied. And so the love which depends on it goes away as well. Real love is an expression of appreciation and admiration for what the other person is. And, for loving that person just for their goodness and kindness and the principles they share with you, right? And all the other things that you admire about them. Right? And if it's about those qualities and not what you can get from that person, then, it's something that will last. Rabbi Mark Angel writes about the problem of so many relationships and social interactions which are essentially selfish, which from both sides are all about me. And these people, they want to become popular, they want to become successful, and they lose sight of the values of honesty and loyalty and respect. Back in the middle of the 20th century, Erich Fromm wrote that we have become things and our neighbors have become things. The result is that we feel powerless and despise ourselves for our impotence. And that's a formula that certainly doesn't result in real love. Love can certainly start as a result of one attractive quality that may or may not have anything to do with goodness, right? But love has to mature and relate to the whole person. Because if love remains fixed just on one particular quality within the beloved, then that love is not mature. Right? And then what happens if that quality disappears or loses its appeal? Then the love also will disappear. But only when love matures can it sustain itself through a lifetime. We all understand that physical attraction is transitory. We all get to a certain point where we're not as young or as sexy as we used to be. I know, because I got to that point very early. Right? So, no, I was specifically made aware of that, right? But, we understand the risk that some things will disappear. Some good aspects of a person that we love may diminish with time. Okay? But in real love, where each one loves the whole person, that doesn't matter unless there's a real change of character. If it's the right kind of love, it will hold up against most of the challenges of life. And Rabbi Yitz Greenberg also points out that unconditional love describes the relationship between God and the people of Israel, who entered into a covenant at Mount Sinai. The prophet Jeremiah describes God as remembering the covenantal love of your youth, the love of your marriage vows when you followed me into your desert, into an unknown land. Right? Notice God's love didn't depend on our obedience. Good thing for that, because God didn't usually get our obedience, right? And Jewish tragedy and suffering may have injured the covenant, but so far has not destroyed it completely. Nachmanides, who lived in the 13th century in Spain, also notes that the Torah tells how God chose Abraham before the Torah ever describes any of Abraham's qualities. So this is to avoid giving any impression that Abraham was necessarily chosen for his righteousness, right? Because that would have suggested that God's love for him and for his descendants would have ended if they were no longer righteous. So this order of things ensures that God's love for Abraham's offspring and descendants does not depend on anything, and thus would last indefinitely. Sometimes what we think is love is just what pleases us. The Kotzker Rebbe once went up to a young man who was enjoying a fish delicacy, and he asked him why he was eating fish. And the guy said, "Well, I love fish." The Rebbe said, "Yeah, is that why you took it out of the water where it was thriving and killed it and cooked it? You don't love the fish, young man. You love yourself. And because the fish tastes good to you, you killed it and ate it." And the problem is, as I think the Kotzker's point was, that for some people, that's what love is about. Okay? Some people love America, right? And they put that at odds with the ability to love people more generally. Rabbi Tamari Elad Applebaum writes that some people mistakenly think that an individual's love for a nation that seals itself off completely from the world is the most exalted and praiseworthy of spiritual and religious commitments and attainments. But that's not the case. The aspiration of each Jew must be to arouse in one's own heart and in the hearts of all people an all-encompassing love that echoes the infinite's love for all creatures. And that's a love which is not dependent on one condition, the condition that my neighbor be more like me. Comments or questions here? Okay, hearing none, let's go to our last teaching for today, number 19. Particularly interesting in the context of rabbis who were constantly engaging in debate with each other. A controversy for heaven's sake will have lasting value, but a controversy not for heaven's sake will not endure. What is an example of a controversy for heaven's sake? The debates of Hillel and Shammai. What is an example of a controversy not for heaven's sake? The rebellion of Korach and his associates. So here we think about, what fights are worth fighting. Maimonides believes the difference in the outcomes of the controversies is a reflection of the intent that is involved. Right? Those who want to instruct others, though they may differ, will be rewarded. Those who wish to cause others to sin will be punished. In the controversy between Hillel and Shammai, the rabbi said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. Even though they may have decided in favor of one camp or the other, nevertheless, they were both the word of God. Right? And there's this great phrase in Hebrew, sofa lahit kayem, to have lasting value. But it's a little bit ambiguous. Usually it's translated as, in the end, the dispute will be resolved. But Bartanora, one of the classic commentators on the Mishnah, translates it as meaning that those who dispute over the law will themselves be sustained. Well, Hillel and Shammai, interestingly, were both blessed with long life. Korach and his followers, well, we read in the book of Numbers about what happened to them. They got swallowed into the earth. So much for being sustained. Okay? People who love each other can argue, but if the love is real, then they usually argue over something other than materialistic pursuits. They can share values and just feel that they need a different approach. In that case, there'll still be a serious respect for the other person. It can even happen for liberals and conservatives who both want what's best for our country and just disagree about how to get there. What a concept. Right? The model of an argument, which is for personal gain, is the controversy of Korach and his followers. And it's interesting that the Mishnah does not frame it as a controversy between Korach and Moses. Because as far as Moses was concerned, wasn't about keeping his position. As Korach and his company, they're just concerned with personal advancement. When that is the motive, you likely won't have peace within that group. It's like shades of Lenin and Trotsky, what happened with them. Okay? And we're told here that these disputes between Hillel and Shammai are the model of those which are for the sake of heaven. So what was so great about those disputes? Neither party was in it for ego. Neither party was in it for personal advancement. They each called the law as they saw it. They disagreed strongly about many issues, but they weren't out to destroy each other. They were just colleagues in search of the truth. And so it should always be when people disagree. And in talking about the debates between Hillel and Shammai, the law had to be decided. Usually, of course, was decided according to the school of Hillel. But there was no loser in the dispute because both sides are cited, both sides are remembered. Under different circumstances, the law might have been decided in a different way. But what they shared in common far outweighed their differences. They tried to serve the community and God. And that was what was important to both of them. There are some disputes today, especially in government, which definitely are in the Korach category, right? People who are fighting for power, seeking to destroy or at least to neutralize their opponents, venting against them ruthlessly. The stronger side wins, the weaker side is forced to surrender. And, make shalom for the days of Hillel and Shammai, where people actually talked to folks in a different camp, and where people could have respect for the position of the other side. And those disputes could be sustained, and we could live with each other after the disputes were settled. Okay? So let me stop here. Do we have any other comments or questions at this point?
There seems to be a good bit of argument, perhaps not for the sake of heaven, in Israel and outside of Israel, between the Haredi and the secular.
Yes.
To me, I find that very disturbing, that those who claim to be pious are not so much.
Mm-hmm. Really, the great model in that issue was the model of Rav Avraham Yitzchak Kook, who was the chief rabbi of pre-state Palestine, who himself was, very devoutly Orthodox, looked very much like a Haredi, and yet spent a lot of his time and energy working with people from the secular community and saying, hey, all of these people are also, creatures of God, created in the image of God, and we're going to be working together on sacred purposes and causes. And that was the approach he took, for which, of course, he was roundly criticized, and some of the secular as well, just, because of who he was and his kind of observance. They chose not to see him as trustworthy. But I think in many important ways, he was the model of how we ought to be, regardless of, where we come down on the spectrum of Judaism.
Where are those leaders today?
Yeah. There are some of them, but they're not, they're generally not very well known because they don't have enough backers. Okay? Rav Kook had his position, which sort of guaranteed that he would be appreciated and remembered, but there are very few people occupying that space today who actually have any meaningful status within the Jewish people. I like to think that our conservative Judaism makes a sustained effort at modeling that kind of commitment.
I would suggest that conservative Judaism in general is the most authentic of all the denominations.
Well, I believe that too. But, I also have to be respectful of people who don't agree with that, right? Because we're going to live together and work together on common purposes. And we should.
Well,
Okay.
we don't have to agree, but we have to respect that we're entitled to our own opinions, as long as those opinions don't force others to be like yourself.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Our mysticism class will come back at noon, and hope to see you there.
Thank you, Danny.
Okay. Thank you all. See you later. Bye-bye.